Strip at Shapley's Steakhouse in Ridgeland. You can visit shapleysrestaurant.com to make a reservation. Twitter handle at Bowbounds and the number 601-707-3750. A lot going on in Starkville, Mississippi the last few weeks and over the weekend. And I'm hoping not to botch this over the next 15 minutes because I've been referring to this guy as the head baseball coach at Mississippi State the last 8 or 9 years that we've had him on the show. But we welcome in John Cohen, the new athletic director at MSU. John, good morning. Welcome in and congratulations.
Thank you, Bo. Appreciate that.
John, when we've heard for some time that this was something that you may want to do at some point. When did John Cohen decide this is something that I want to do and I want to do it now?
Wow. That's an excellent question, Bo. You know, a lot of people want to do a lot of things, and the opportunity has to provide itself or present itself. And certainly, you know, there's some good fortune involved. My good fortune is Mississippi State's bad fortune from the aspect that we just lost maybe the best athletic director in the country in Scott Strickland, just a dear friend, a mentor to me, somebody who is exceptionally bright. He, of course, accepted the position at the University of Florida, and when that happened, I'm being completely honest. I was really looking forward. I had been named an associate athletic director a little bit earlier in the summer. I was looking forward to that opportunity that Scott gave to me, and things just started happening as they do in our business, and that's what got us to this point here.
I know how competitive you are, and I know that you loved coaching baseball and developing players and Friday nights in the SEC and coaching in Omaha. And I remember the post-game press conference after UCLA made the statement that MSU would be back and they would win it. And I know it'll still mean a lot to you if that happens, whether you're head coach or AD. But how much did you and Nell and your family, how much did you think about that the last, whatever it was, 4 to 6 weeks, as far as not going back to Omaha and coaching and possibly winning a national championship?
You know, Bo, I really believe that it doesn't matter to me if Andy Cannizzaro is wearing that number 11 and he's leading us to the College World Series championship. I will be every bit as happy, because the reality of it is, when we competed for a national championship in 2013, it's so much bigger than John Cohen. You know, it's Butch Thompson, it's Nick Mingione, it's our players, 8 of whom are going to end up being big leaguers off that one team, and all the other guys and all of our fans. It's just so much bigger than one person. And when you realize those things, it makes it so much easier. And Mississippi State is just much bigger than one person, than one sports program. And but yeah, will I miss it a little bit, Bo? Yeah, of course, I'll miss it a little bit. But now, you know, I get to compete through 16 Division I programs, and that's just incredibly exciting to me.
John Cohen, new athletic director at MSU, on the Out of Bounds show and the New Belgium Fat Tire Hotline, officially named the AD on Friday. And then John Cohen made his first hire within 24 hours, and he mentioned Andy Cannizzaro from LSU, hitting coach, recruiting coordinator under Paul Mainieri, and had spent almost a decade with the New York Yankees. So how do you channel you've been around Jeremy Foley, and you've been around Mitch Barnhart and your friends Greg Byrne and Scott Strickland. How do you channel that competitive edge and the will to win and all that, the way you're wired now as athletic director at MSU?
You know what's crazy? I just want to take a step back. You know, when I was a 30 or 31-year-old head coach at Northwestern Louisiana, and I've said this a couple of times, I went to my first head coaches meeting in the Southland Conference in Dallas, Texas, and our commissioner at that time was a really competitive young guy who had great vision maybe the smartest person I've ever met. His name was Greg Sankey. And at that point in time, it was made obvious to me that you can be competitive and not necessarily have to be a coach. Greg Sankey wanted the Southland Conference to be the best baseball league in America, and that was a tall order when you look at others. But I just, and I've said this before, it's been an embarrassment of riches for me in terms of the role models that I have had, the people that I have aspired to be in coaching and outside of coaching. You mentioned Mitch Barnhart and Jeremy Foley and Scott Strickland and Greg Byrne. Joe Castiglione was my first athletic director at the University of Missouri. And, of course, Joe is at the University of Oklahoma now. We still speak. What an incredible mentor. I learned so much from Joe Castiglione. So, yeah, you can compete. You can be extremely competitive, but you can do it in a little bit of a different way. And, again, I look forward to doing that through our 16 sports here at Mississippi State.
Now, the relatability factor is one that I think you have a leg up in. You know what it takes to recruit, to develop, to manage the locker room, all the players who want to play. There's only so many positions on the field. Culture, chemistry, all of that. So I would have to believe that John Cohen feels like that's a valuable asset. You've rebuilt programs. You had to. At Kentucky, they had never won an SEC championship, so you took them to places they had never been. I can say this, you don't have to confirm, but I thought it was a total rebuild in Starkville. And then some of the other places that you've been, does that give John Cohen, is that a valuable asset for John Cohen going forward, managing these 16 head coaches and all the assistant coaches, John?
Well, certainly, Bo. I think it's an example, but there's a reason why. There are a lot of administrators around the country who don't have any coaching experience. In some respects, and I really believe this, in some respects, some of the greatest coaches of all time are coaches who weren't great players. And in many cases, there are great coaches who never even played the game that they're coaching. And I really believe that about athletic directors. Some of the best athletic directors of all time were guys who didn't play sports, guys who were not on teams, guys who didn't coach, but they have this incredible vantage point. They have this incredible way to evaluate things that are around them. But I do agree, having been a coach, having been on, the collegiate battlefield, if you will, having been in the dugout, on the bench, it is a different perspective, and I think it is unique, and I think it's something that I can use to my advantage, and I think it's something that our coaches really appreciate. Just because, there's that bond that we have, that we've been in battle together. I will say this, though. Scott Strickland was as good at connecting with coaches and understanding what they went through, because he traveled with teams, because he was in media relations at a very young age, and he understood the emotions, he understood the planning, and I think that's what made Scott an exceptional athletic director.
John Cohen, new athletic director at MSU, on the Out of Bounds Show and ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Greg Byrne and Scott Strickland have both told stories on this show and to me one-on-one that when Mitch Barnhart hired you from Florida as the head baseball coach at Kentucky, and then you started to implement your plan and turn the program around and win, that they would always say to themselves, that's the model, that's the blueprint. Why is that, John?
Bo, I don't know if I can explain that. That's extremely kind on their part. I think it's several things. You're in this league, you can't have a frontal attack, meaning you can't just say we're going to out-money you. You can't say even that you're going to out-coach people. But you can certainly outwork people. And I tell you another thing that you can do. I think you can be extremely creative in the surroundings that you have at your school to create the best plan of action. Great example, when I went to the University of Kentucky, I was coming from Florida, and so many people would say, "Oh, you're going to open up Florida to Kentucky. You're going to bring up Florida kids." No. That's not what we were going to do. We were going to get northern kids and bring them down to Kentucky and sell the fact that it's the gateway to the Southeastern Conference. Michigan kids, Ohio kids, they thought of Kentucky as being in the South. And it's the opposite when you're recruiting Deep South kids. They thought they were going into, the Great White North. So I think it's all about creativity, and I think it's all about having a plan and having people buy into your plan. And again, those guys you just mentioned, Scott Strickland and Greg Byrne, I think they exemplify that in their professional lives as well.
John Cohen on the Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. All right, John. So needless to say, you've had a lot going on. You go from baseball coach to athletic director, and these are prestigious jobs and highly sought after. To be one of 14 in the SEC is big time and a big deal. So not only do you land the job, but you have to replace yourself. So what went into take me through what John Cohen, who's coached in the College World Series, won SEC championships, as a player been in the CWS, what was John Cohen looking for when you picked Andy Cannizaro from LSU?
Well, I don't think it's arrogant of me to say that obviously there are a ton of baseball people who would love this opportunity. But when Scott was announced at the University of Florida on September the 24th, I felt like, I wasn't sure, but I felt like I might have an opportunity to sit in front of a selection committee here at Mississippi State for this position. But I knew I couldn't sit in front of that committee unless I had a pretty good idea about what I was going to do for baseball.
Sure.
Because that would be my first decision as an athletic director if I was fortunate enough to be picked. And I do want to say this right now, Bo. It was a process. Our president went through a process, a long, arduous process that he took seriously. And I think he did that for Mississippi State. He did that for John Cohen. He did that because it was the right thing to do. And I tell you, it's an amazing thing to hear things filter out in the media before you even get interviewed.
Sure.
And I think that put a lot of pressure on our president, and it put a lot of pressure on the people he was interviewing, really good people from around the country. But as always, he handled it flawlessly, and that's how much I respect Dr. Keenan. But getting back to your question, I did a lot of D1 baseball, a lot of Boyd's World, and just staring at the 290-plus Division I baseball programs, who would fit this mold? Who would fit with Mississippi State? Who has SEC experience? Who has professional baseball experience? Who really gets recruiting? Who connects with players? Who gets the game? Who is a great tactician? There were so many factors involved. Who really values this as an opportunity and instead of just another contract in their professional career? When I got through that process, Bo, there were really about 7 or 8 names on the page, and getting down to Andy Cannizaro at some point was pretty easy. I'd had the good fortune this summer of spending a lot of time on the road. Why? Because we had just lost 2 coaches who had gone to other SEC schools, and I needed to be on the road a ton, a little bit more than I'd been in the past, and I just kept running into Andy Cannizaro. We had some really deep discussions about the game and other things, and I was really blown away with who he is and the way he goes about his business.
All right. That's impressive. So John Cohen on the Out of Bounds Show, he had to replace himself. That's rare that happens. New AD, MSU, and then hired Andy Cannizaro, who will be on the show this week. He's the new head baseball coach at MSU, coming in from LSU. Now I have to ask this question, John. I'm sure you've already maybe been asked it or heard about it, but how I would think he's going to ask for advice, because he's a first-time head coach, but I'll ask it a different way. How does John Cohen keep from – I know how much the program means to you. You played and you're the head baseball coach. How do you keep from meddling in baseball and what Andy Cannizaro will do?
Well, I've replaced some giants myself. I replaced Ron Polk. I replaced Keith Madison, a legendary coach at Kentucky, and I replaced Dave Van Horn at Northwestern Louisiana.
I didn't realize that.
All
Wow.
those cases, yeah. I just absolutely wore out the people who had done it before. There's no reason not to get advice from those people. Andy has already sought out my advice, but man, he has some great role models in his career that we're going to unveil today. I mean, you're talking about a guy who played for Joe Madden. You're talking about a guy who played for Joe Torre. You're talking about a guy who was recruited and signed and played for Jim Schlossnagle at TCU and Rick Jones at Tulane. This guy has some amazing role models. He has so many people that have helped get him to where he is today. So Andy's one of those guys. He's inquisitive. He wants to know. He asks questions. He is constantly learning. I'm 50 years old. I coached collegiate baseball for 24 and a half years. I felt like I was still learning, and that's one of the things that drew me to Andy. He just has that thirst for knowledge. But at age 37, the quality and quantity of his knowledge is extraordinary, and I think our players are already seeing that at Mississippi State.
I know that you would have been thrilled and excited, even as the baseball coach, watching what happened Saturday in Starkville. But what was it like wearing a different hat as the CEO, athletic director at MSU? And you've coached teams where things don't go your way. You know, you lose a bunch of 4-3 games throughout the year, or whatever, and maybe injuries here and there. You know what it takes to win in the SEC. You grew up in Tuscaloosa, all of that. What was it like to see what played out on Saturday for Mississippi State and Dan Mullen with the struggles they've been through this year in beating the number 4 team in the country, John?
Hey, excellent question, Bo. And I want to tell you, and I'm saying this right from the heart, there's no difference to me in being the baseball coach and being on the sideline or being up in a box and cheering for Dan Mullen and his team. I'm a Mississippi State guy, and I love his players. I love the way they go about their business. It was a tremendous victory for them on Saturday for many reasons. The only difference between being the athletic director and the baseball coach is what you're going to do immediately after that football game. I have always, after every football game, especially, the wins, gone up and given Dan and Megan a hug and let them know how much I appreciated them. He has had some big wins at Mississippi State. And I just want him to, as an alum and as a member of this athletic department, I just want him to know how much we appreciate him and Megan. The only thing that's different now is that my checklist after a football game is different. Instead of rushing back to the baseball office and meeting with recruits and getting ready for our practice either that afternoon or the following day, now I'm going to a press conference and I just have a different checklist. And I'm just, instead of caring for our players and our coaches and our recruits and our fans, now I'm immediately into, hey, we got a volleyball game the next day.
Right.
And I loved watching our kids compete yesterday against Florida, and we're getting better there. It's just a different checklist. But the thing that's exactly the same is you love Mississippi State, and when you see kids go out there and compete their hearts out for your institution like they did Saturday, man, it just makes you feel awfully good.
John Cohen on the Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone, new athletic director at MSU. And we'll have Andy Cannizaro on the show on Wednesday, I think. And John and MSU will introduce Coach Cannizaro today, officially, as the head baseball coach at MSU. John, we kept you over. I appreciate your time. We'll do this again soon. Congratulations again.
Thank you so much, Bo.
John Cohen.